big welcome to our guest who is doing this interview for the second time, given that we screwed up on the recording. Um, Welcome to Admissions Roadmap MBA Success Stories. Today's guest is Siddharth, who studied at Harvard Business School. Um, I'm hoping that he's got a lot to share because I know what he's going to share, and I hope everybody makes great use of it. I want to start the interview with one thing, Siddharth. Let's talk about what we did not talk about yesterday, and let's talk about the piece of stand-up comedy. How did you
Uh,
discover that? When did you find out that there's that opportunity in business school that you can explore that side of you?
you know, I was always interested, I don't want to say in stand-up comedy, but on similar things. Like when I was 3 or 4 years old, I would do impressions of my uncles and aunts, and they would fall laughing. So I've always like done some stuff around those lines, but never really stand-up comedy per se. And I think when I came to Harvard, even then, I really, really wanted to do it. In fact, I told people in the first week that that's my true passion. And then there was a comedy show which we were organizing. So I was hesitant, but then my friends pushed me to go audition, and I auditioned, and I made through. And then after that, I just kept doing several shows. It was a lot of fun. The thing which I'm like the most excited about during the school life.
The reason I ask it is this: for everybody that's going to listen, I'll put the show notes and even embed the YouTube video onto my site so people can look at it. It's actually quite funny. It's quite representative, especially when people are doing school research. You can inform yourself on the humorous side of all of the schools
Uh,
that you can visit there.
yeah.
Um, I participated at the Ross Follies or the Business School Follies, which is basically
Okay.
mocking the entire school system or making fun
Yeah.
of what is around the school. Um, the reason this is important to say is it's business school. Yes, we're all trying to get business knowledge, but it's not all that. There's more to
Yeah.
life than that, and there's this as well.
Of course. Yeah.
Thanks for joining, man. Thanks for doing this again.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Uh, you studied in IIT Delhi with a
Yep.
bachelor's and master's in technology.
Yep.
You went on to work at Deutsche Bank in the capital markets for 3 years, a little over 3 years. You
Mhm.
subsequently took an offbeat path, went on to the government of India as the youngest director in the Ministry of Finance. The journey there is incredible. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then you went on to Harvard Business School.
Yep.
Um, let's talk about your motivations. What were you thinking about at that point? What did you see when you were working at Deutsche Bank and when you were working at the government of India that led you to believe, yes, business school or MBA is the right path for me?
Yeah. I mean, I can give you the polished answer, which was that going to business school would have helped me leapfrog in my career, not just for now, but for later on, and make me more rounded, both in terms of hard and soft skills. But to be very honest, and now that I've done school, I can be more honest and candid. I just went there because that's what everyone was doing. That was the right thing to do. That's what the cool kids were doing.
Mm.
And I just followed the usual path. In hindsight, I'm glad I did it, but I wish I had better reasons for doing it. And now that I've done it, I see a lot of benefit of that degree, which is much more than things like just getting an MBA tag or just getting a big brand. The learning and the experience was much richer. So very glad I did it, but wish I was better informed back then.
The common it is a common path for anybody, especially Indians that want to not only step outside of the country, want to get a global business degree and potentially
Yeah,
rise up in the career. It's an
yeah,
extraordinary path, but yes, it's useful to actually go do that, do the soul searching to understand why you really want it, so that you can make the
yeah,
best use of the MBA itself.
yeah,
Um, let's not spend too much time on your path from Deutsche Bank to the government of India, but share with me because it informs why you stand out to be more unique than many other candidates. Share with me
yeah,
that experience
yeah.
and what you learned there and how it helped you subsequently in your business school application.
Yeah, there are several trajectories which can lead you to business school. There is a standard go to an IIT or other good college and then go to consulting or banking and then maybe do some investing and then get in, which is of course one of the most standard paths, but it's also very competitive. As an Indian male engineer, which is what I am, it's it's one of the most competitive pools to get into business school, as people realize. So I did want to do something slightly off track, but at the same time, I think what the reason why I started doing all this, I first helped the gentleman, Mr. Jensen, in his election campaign, and then subsequently joined him later on. So I think why I entered had nothing to do with MBA. It was just to explore something different, have an adventure, learn something which was completely different, far away, both literally and figuratively, from my air-conditioned office in Mumbai to an election campaign of Lok Sabha in rural, poverty-stricken, left-wing extremism marred Hazaribagh in Jharkhand. So it was a very difficult switch, and I just thought that if you go different places, do different things, you become a better and more learned individual. So it was a different, unique experience which drove me there. The MBA thing kind of gradually kicked in later on.
Yeah. Doing something out of absolute interest is extremely important. And this is more so vital for most Indians. We spoke about this yesterday, where about 6 months before the MBA applications, Indians tend to write some nonprofit work
Yeah.
that they've done.
Yeah.
Whereas you actually had genuine interest in something, had a connection with a person because you
Yeah.
received an award, and subsequently
Yeah.
chose to go down that path to get a completely
Yeah.
different exposure,
Yeah.
which made
Yeah.
you uniquely qualified.
Yeah. Like I said, it started with just getting the exposure, and then as it sort of panned out, the whole business school angle kicked in, which of course helped with the decision.
The gentleman that you worked with, Jayant Sinha, also was a graduate of IIT Delhi and
Yeah.
Harvard Business School.
Yeah.
Talk about the role, if any, in the application process that he played, particularly with the letter of recommendation, and if that helped in any way to position you differently to Harvard Business School.
Oh, absolutely. It made a huge difference to my application for multiple reasons. Uh, to begin with, of course, he provided me a letter of recommendation, which, as a person as senior as him, he was not only a Harvard alum and a McKinsey partner, but he was also a minister in the central government. So, of course, a senior recommendation that absolutely makes a difference. But even more than that, he would, help me with my essays and edit it and spend time, which was pretty incredible for a person of his stature to do so. But on the other, it was not just the business school process. He also trained and groomed me in a way which really helped me not just to get into school, but also in my life after that. From the simplest of things, such as how to present yourself or how to dress impeccably, which he was very, very particular about, to more nuanced things as to how to have an intelligent conversation, how to be more mature and smart and empathetic when speaking with senior people. So it was a collection of a lot of training, and at the same time, his recommendation, of course, was very valuable.
Extraordinary. You mentioned that he helped you tremendously with the application as well.
Yeah, yeah. He would like trash away my essays.
Oh, wow. Let's talk about the application process. Let's talk about what you knew of the application process back then,
Yeah,
and how did you go on to research about how to write better, compelling essays?
yeah. I broadly like sort of dividing the application into four parts. Not all of them have the same weightage. There is the profile or the CV, the document which you send, which is basically a collection of everything which you've done, the schools you've gone to, the jobs you've done, the extracurriculars you've done. And it's sort of, if you can compile that into one document, your profile. Secondly, your letters of recommendation. Third, your GMAT. And fourth, your essay. Now, of course, you need a good GMAT score, but at the same time, one of the myths is that a high GMAT means you got into the school of your choice, and a low GMAT means not. Both these myths are wrong, and there'll be several exceptions on both sides. So GMAT is an indicator of academic performance, and that's about it. Then, of course, the letters of recommendation, which I would say should ideally be with someone. It helps that the person is senior, and if the person is an alum, but most importantly, the person should know you well and be able to put their head out and give you a strong recommendation with specific, tangible examples, something which at times people get wrong. Then your CV, of course, your profile, everything you've done, and there's limited stuff which you can do in the next 6 months. Joining us suddenly in an NGO may not always be the bad idea. May not always be a good idea.
Great idea,
so,
yeah.
so you need to think about it beforehand, maybe think about it a few years before, and plan in advance. But then coming to the essay, this is an extremely important document for your application. And by the way, one thing which you can actually put in an effort and change it and make a difference to your application by writing a powerful story.
Mm,
So now talking about the story, I think there are different ways to think about it.
mm,
One of the things which people often follow is a template, which
mm,
is a chronological series of events
mm, mm,
about how I was always so good and how I
mm,
always had a big vision and I've been moving towards it. I did this, which was awesome. Then I did this, which was awesome. Then I crushed
mm,
here, crushed here, crushed here. And this is
mm,
how awesome I am, and admit me.
mm,
Every school sees through that, and your life cannot all be connected so beautifully well. Uh, so the caveat is a lot of people do that and very successfully. This is a standard template. I personally don't find it so authentic and genuine, and feel that every 20-25 year old makes a lot of mistakes and learns, and you cannot potentially always be a rock star. Like, that's
yeah.
just not
It's
possible.
impossible. Yeah.
Right. You always develop and grow and mature. I think that's more important than always being the topmost performer in something. So the kind of essay I would suggest is a very powerful essay. The first one could be a good essay and you can get in, but to really distinguish yourself and create a difference in that document,
Mm,
it should be authentic, it should be candid, it should tell the mistakes you've made, the things you went wrong with, the fact that at times you did not know what you were doing, but at the
mm,
same time, with all those mistakes or confusion, you learned, you took
mm,
feedback. If you
mm,
notice, several recommendations have that question: how does the candidate react to feedback? Because that shows how receptive you are and how much you grow. So
mm,
improving and growing and failing but succeeding, for sounding cliched, that's really much more important, that you've gradually become and evolved as a person. I would consider that as a stronger, powerful essay. And just one last thing on that, I think the first paragraph of the essay is extremely important because that's your first impression. And as I shared yesterday, so will I do today. My first line was, because I thought I had a boring profile. I started by saying last year I fell in love at first sight, and I then talk about my wife, but then gradually make it about more serious stuff and about decisions making in life. So my point is, you should move the reader, completely shock them, and create a powerful impact with your first paragraph. So enough said. I'll pause now.
yeah. It, it's so true. We spoke about this yesterday as well, where creativity and storytelling is extremely vital. And Indians have the ability to do it, but we just don't showcase it. We think
Yeah,
that business schools want to see essays that are, like you said, a chronological listing of achievements or what you've done at work.
yeah,
They
yeah.
can see that on the resume. What they want to see
Yes,
is the deeper reasons as to why you did something.
yeah.
If you
That's
failed, show
yeah.
us that and show us
That's
what you
such a
learned
great
from
point.
it.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
people should remember that the resume is a resume and an essay is an essay. So
yeah,
do not use your essay to say things which you've already said in your
on the
resume.
resume.
So if you did something which had $1 million impact, you can just write that in your resume. But what you should write in your essay is that how difficult it was to do that
To
because no
actually
one
do
was
that.
listening to you. Like,
Yeah.
those human emotions and feelings and failure and learning is so much more powerful than just numbers, which can anyway be on a CV.
Yeah, so true. That's a great point. Let's talk about before you applied to Harvard, what was the process of doing research on top business
Yep.
schools? Did you
Yep.
follow the traditional path that Indians do, saying, "Hey, let me just look at the ranking"? If
Yeah.
so, what is the learning now in hindsight, and what would
Yeah.
you recommend to students when they're doing research about business schools?
Yeah, needless to say, research is obviously something extremely important. Like you mentioned, it often how the students would research is that, all right, this is what the FT rankings say, and this is what the economist rankings say, so I will apply 1, 2, and 4. Unfortunately, that's I don't agree with that. Firstly, I feel that rankings may not. I mean, you don't need to get so granular. I would rather consider schools as in terms of broad rungs than ranks. So a top rung, maybe a second rung, a third rung, and so on and so forth. That would be a better way to divide schools if you want to. And secondly, a lot of it is about things which the rankings do not reflect, such as the culture of the school, how that area is, and then we can come back to that later. So to your point on how to research, I would say three things, three avenues to research. First, and the most basic, but unfortunately not enough, is just reading about the school. So read blogs, read the researcher school websites. read everything you can. But again, that's just a founding stone. Never just because you've seen the list of 3 clubs and 3 professors and 3 courses, quote them in your essay and prove that you've researched. That's just not good enough.
Yeah, don't do
So,
that.
so, so absolutely do the second thing. I think it's a must, which is speak to current students, recent students, and other alums, because they will give you a flavor of what it's really like being in that school, how that school is different from other schools, what's the culture like, and most importantly, is that school even a good fit for you, and are you a good fit for the school? Something which we tend to not think about as much. And finally, you should also try going to seminars and events which the school organizes. Now, a lot of people consider going to the US or wherever the school is situated to actually go visit the school. My personal view is that it's not like that completely changes your chances totally. It's good to do that. So if you're visiting the US for some other reason, do try to squeeze in that trip. But at the same time, I understand it's a lot of time and resources and money spent to take that trip, and you'll be disappointed to see that its effects are not as much. So it's a good thing to do, but don't sweat too much for that.
It can actually, you're absolutely right. With the limited resources, the visa restrictions, and all of that, may be a little difficult for Indians to go travel
Yeah,
to the school.
yeah,
It does showcase, if you can go immerse yourself there, it
yeah.
showcases a side of the culture that you wouldn't otherwise have. That is, how are the
Sure.
classes held? What
Yeah,
are the people like in person? And
yeah,
we're hoping that with this MBA Success Stories series, where people like you are coming on, that can help. They can see a
right.
culture for what it is when we
Yeah,
speak about it as well. So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
great point. You got into Harvard Business School. Uh, let's talk about the day you got into Harvard. What was that day like? We didn't talk about this yesterday, but I want to know. I remember I was thinking
Yeah,
about the day I got into Ross when I was working in London and what
yeah.
it felt like. Talk to me about that experience.
Well, it was a very special day, of course. I remember me and my wife, we were both chatting about it, and then she kept saying, so I did have a couple of backup schools. So she was like, I love those schools. They're great schools. It's fine, it's fine. And then I was like, yeah, sure, okay. But then when you open your email, and they're very smart, right? They don't start with, we had an interesting discussion, blah, blah, blah. No, 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 no.
No.
They start with answer first. The answer is yes.
Yes.
And that's and no one reads after that. You do that a couple of days later. So I started shouting, and that's when my wife said, "I hated all those other schools. I only wanted you to go into Harvard." So, thank you for the pressure. But yeah, it was truly a very special moment. Yeah, I've been very happy of that.
Let's talk about what you knew would be the process once you went into school. What did you expect business school life would be like?
Yeah.
And what did it turn out to be in the first 90 days?
I think uh, I expected it to be smoother than it was. I thought it'll be like now that, of course, I've gotten into Harvard Business School, everything will align and fall into place, which is, of course, not the case. I like this analogy that business school, especially the first few days, are like a Caesar's buffet. There are 200 great items on the menu. Some are phenomenal, some are very good, some are right. But it's up to you, and you decide what to pick. So broadly, there are 3 buckets of things which are going on. The academics, which are, let's say, the salads, the recruiting, which are the mains, and the social, which are the dessert. You can keep eating only dessert, but then you regret that after 2 years because that's not what you came to business school for. You can only do the salads and the academic stuff, but then you miss out on recruiting and social, which are very important too. An ideal meal should comprise of salads and mains and desserts, and then based on your preference and your situation, and only you can decide that. You decide which you want to overweigh. There's no way you can do 100% of all 3 of them. That
Yeah,
the trilemma, which you were talking about, that's it's impossible. But at the
yeah,
same time, I believe you should do an appropriate amount of all 3 of them, and then prioritize what's important to you. And it's also part of like being trained as a business manager. You will
yeah,
never have infinite resources or infinite time. You need to
yeah.
pick your battles and fight them. So never have FOMO, fear of missing out. Never have FOMO because you will miss out on things. Know what you want and then give it your best.
Um, I'll reveal something very personal. I've mentioned this in a couple of other interviews as well. What I found in business school is that my American peers were much more adept at balancing these 3 competing priorities than I found myself in a position to be in.
Why do
Uh,
you think so?
so I remember in my very first year, of course, I tried to do all three,
Yeah.
uh, 200%. Um, in the first term, I remember a finance paper that I was completely slacking on because I just couldn't manage that, and the recruiting pressures and all the consulting companies coming on board,
Yeah.
and going out socially and the homework, um, to a point where I know my peers had to carry the weight. I
Yeah.
thank them for it. Saurabh, if you're listening to this, thank you. But but I saw that my American peers were so much better at this. They knew when it's time to party, let's
Mm.
go have fun.
Yeah.
When it's time to
Yeah.
study, they're always prepared and they come in class. Did you
Yeah.
face the same experience in business school, particularly
Yeah.
for our Indian folks?
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges in balancing these priorities? Because we're not
You know,
used
that's
to them
such
in
a,
our
yeah.
school program.
You know, that's such a good point. I think so. As I grew up as a regular middle class Indian, when you have exams, you're told, okay, exams, mode on, you study, 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 and that's about it. Then when you have a summer vacation, okay, vacation mode on, play, 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 play. That's wrong. Life should be much more balanced. So I think when I started, that was something similar to what I did. But towards the end, you know that even if you haven't like recruiting going on, you can still, you should still not completely get laid back on your academics, let's say. And just because you have an exam doesn't mean you cannot have a drink with a friend. Uh, do like balance it out. Be like do all those things in moderation. And I do feel that I can't generalize that for other people, but I definitely struggled with maintaining the right balance in the first few months. There's also a little bit of cultural shock, right? It's just very different from what you've been doing before, both the country and business school. So there are like multiple elements changing for us, but lesser so for the others. So yes, absolutely, I feel that that balance is more important. I think I agree that Indians don't always do the best job at it when they enter school.
Um, Before we go on to the entire journey, let's try and identify what the culture at Harvard was.
Yeah,
You spent two
yeah,
years there. You
yeah,
told me off air that it has its unique
yeah,
culture.
yeah,
Talk about that with examples so that others can
yeah,
learn from what truly
yeah,
exemplifies a Harvard culture and experience.
yeah. Yeah, so let's just first talk about culture as a concept, right? I feel like when I was getting in, that's not something which I had in mind. I wanted to go to Harvard because that was my dream, and because yes, it was a top rung school. Um, while that's true, I do think that you should also very much consider the culture of a school. So I did not get admitted to Stanford, and I was pretty bummed about it. Like,
Hmm.
fine, I always wanted to go into Harvard, but then I also wanted admission from Stanford, right? Like, and also they were in different rounds. So I was bummed about it. Today, I realized that they were absolutely right because I was not a good fit for Stanford, and Stanford was not a good fit for me. That is something which we often ignore. So, yes, it's important to think about the rank and the rung and the opportunities post school and the professional work experience and all of those good things. But whether you're a good fit and whether the school is a good fit for you is extremely important. And that's where every school has a unique culture. So for instance,
Cool.
how does
But
this?
before you
Sorry.
go on to the
Yeah.
specifics of
Yeah.
the Harvard
Yeah.
culture,
Yeah. Yeah.
as you mentioned this, a call back out to the stand-up performance. Make sure to go watch that stand-up performance. It shows you the lighter side of the difference between the culture of Stanford and Harvard. When that joke came about,
Yes.
I was like, oh, damn, that's so true. That's so true. Go on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, thank you for plugging that in. Please do watch my video. Okay, so I think so. When you contrast cultures, Harvard has a very norms-driven culture, partly because of its tradition, and maybe even the northeast of the U.S. is a little bit like that, and also some of the things which why Harvard is so good for its alum network, its case study method. They do thrive on having a specific set of norms. For instance, like if someone is speaking in class, forget the fact that you will not speak over them. You cannot even raise your hand while they are speaking because that's how the case study method thrives. So it's a norms driven culture. Stanford, on the other hand, is a very do what you like, free flowing culture. I could argue in favor of either of them. Both are important in their own ways. The important thing is what are you better suited for, and whatever you want to do after that will align with which school better. So, for instance, Harvard has a strong push around leadership, as everyone knows. And the mission statement, which we often rubbish off as just one line which someone got together to think about, actually does reflect a lot about how the school thinks. So Harvard's mission statement, creating business leaders who will make a difference in the world, they stand by every word of it. They want you to become a leader. They want you to think like a leader. How would you be a leader 20 years later? What impacts second order, third order to the next generation, to your stakeholders will your decisions have? What kind of difference are you creating in the world? What footprint are you leaving? Not every school thinks like that. A dear friend of mine from Wharton says, for example, they just told be nice people and do what you want to do. That there's not as much as a thrust on being the next leader of the world, but that's what the Harvard culture is like, and that's how they hone you. For some people may not like that, and they just want to be people who want to develop good technology, and then probably they're not the best fit for Harvard. I mean, of course, you can get into Harvard and develop the best technology as the Facebook guy did, and people do that all the time. But there is a push on leadership, for instance. The case study method. I know people know about it and mention it in passing, but that's completely unique. Harvard, of course, was the almost the founder and the biggest promoter of the case study method, and the learning from case study method is completely different from a regular lecture-based method. So every school has its specific nuances in its culture, which are extremely important to research, I believe.
Let's talk about the perception. Harvard being one of the top schools, if not the top one, would generally have type A players, as would be in most of the top 10 schools.
Yeah.
That can come off, therefore, as either arrogant or seemingly extremely competitive. Talk
Yeah.
about that. What did that
Yeah.
feel like, both from your Indian peers as well as internationals,
Yeah.
as
You
well
know,
as Americans?
yeah. So, when I was entering the school, my impression was like, this is super competitive, all type A personalities, dog eats dog. Oh my God. I was completely wrong. I think, firstly, people are very nice. They're extremely helpful. I think part of that is also driven by the school norms and culture. Yes, of course, there are people who are a little too type A. There could be arrogant people. There are all sorts of people everywhere. But I think partly because of the culture and because what people around you are doing, the end result is that students are extremely helpful to each other. They're not competitive. The grading process is designed in such a way that you don't really need to compete with others. Uh, Also because people want to maintain a reputation that they're helpful. So a lot of factors combined, eventually I think students are extremely helpful to each other. That could be the smallest of things, such as asking for an onion for someone at 10 o'clock because you were cooking, or asking for someone to help you with financial models because you've never studied finance before, or asking someone for leads because it's late and you don't have an internship and you're worried, so you just shout out that I want an internship in this, and like suddenly everyone will start giving you recommendations and warm leads. So in the smallest or the biggest of things, I think the community of Harvard is extremely helpful.
The good thing about most of the top 10 schools, and most schools, most business schools in the US, is they balance the competitiveness and collaboration quite well.
Yeah.
Most students go in knowing that the 2 years is not the end of the race. The race is a
Yeah.
long-term race and it's not a zero-sum game. Everybody
Yeah.
can and should potentially win.
Yeah, and that's why reputation is extremely important. So whichever school you go to, do try to create a favorable reputation as a nice, fun, humble, helpful human being. Otherwise, they will not respond to your emails 20 years later.
Yeah, very important. Let's talk about what the first 90 days were, and the second, so first 90 days when
Yeah,
you got into business school, but
yeah,
more importantly, the second 90 days as well,
yeah, yeah,
particularly in relation to recruiting,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
What are the opportunities available for internationals,
yeah,
and what were the priorities like when you were trying to recruit
yeah.
out of Harvard Business School?
Yeah. So, like we were discussing earlier, the first 90 days whiz by and you have no clue how fast. And then recruiting kicks in. Now, certain things which one must understand about recruiting, which is very different from India. I recruited in a very different way. IITs have like a day one, all the companies come to interview you, and it's just so different. So, firstly, it's a long drawn process. There's no day one per se. You meet people over drinks in starting October, know about the firms, they know about you, you network. Not all recruiting is done through companies on campus. Like the biggest companies come on campus, but the smaller ones, which by the way could often have better roles and responsibilities than a big company would. So that is often through network searches. reaching out, cold, warm, through networks, anyway. So it's very different in that sense. And then typically a lot of firms come in on in January to that's for internships. Full time is slightly different. Most people are placed through internships. So that again, I think the other myth is that just because I am getting into a top business school, I will get the job of my dreams super easy. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Firstly, there are a lot of very good people in that school, and
Yeah.
firms take you not only because you have a tag, but because you actually will be valuable for them, right? They're after all profit-making enterprises. So important to understand that if you're an expert in a certain field, your chances, of course, to get into that field are obviously
Are
high.
greater. Yeah.
But then you need to have cultural context that specific. You need to understand that market. So you might be an expert in selling cereal in India, but if you've ever seen a cereal like a supermarket store in the US, you know that you know nothing about cereal, right? It's completely different ball games.
Yeah.
Or even if you're investing in Indian markets, investing in US markets could be very different. So you need to understand that context. With certain industries, such as banking and consulting and tech, they require lesser market and country-specific knowledge, but certain other industries really care about that. The other angle, which I think people don't realize, is that a lot of jobs are just simply not open for you. And here is a plug-in for my article I wrote in the Harbus a few
Harvard.
months back. It was called "You're Not Eligible." Basically, what I talk about is that what we don't realize is that a lot of jobs are just not open because companies require you to have permanent work authorization in the US. So as a non-American citizen, they will not sponsor you for your visas. This is typically common for smaller companies. They don't want that risk. Even certain bigger companies just simply don't do it. Generally speaking, tech, the big tech, not the small tech, the big tech, consulting firms, the big banks, and some of the other bigger corporations are more open to taking you because they can sponsor you. And even if you don't get a visa, they can move you to another international office. But a lot of other jobs are just not open for you. So please, it's very important. I would argue that maybe about a third of the jobs are simply not open for you. So look into that before, or rather during your application process. You should understand how your job prospects change because of your citizenship.
When I was reading the Harbus article, what I assume typically when people write article for their business school is it's mild. Yours was actually a fairly bold statement.
Yeah,
That gave me a little bit of insight into what could be the culture at Harvard, where you can make a
yeah,
statement and make it so confidently if it's true.
yeah.
Uh,
No, that's yeah. Sorry, yeah.
yeah,
No, that's
that may just be
yeah,
me reading into it, but
yeah.
please let me know. Yeah.
I think that that's a good point. I never thought about it. Howard is a lot about original thinking, and to be honest, a couple of my friends warned that this article is strong, but I think the acid test which it should pass, that it should be respectful.
Hmm.
If you're not respectful towards a community or a school or a type of people or whatnot, that is no, strict no, you can't do that.
Hmm.
But if as long as you're respectful
Hmm.
and factually correct, and you're raising a point of view which may be controversial, but makes people, forces them to see something in a different light, the things
Hmm.
which are unsaid. Howard, in its quest to create leaders who think originally and differently, I think I never found a pushback ever with that article from anyone at all.
Hmm. Also speaks to the way the reason I brought this, and it's a good point that you mentioned that you need to be respectful. It is in that same parallel. Any discussion within the school with your peers
Yeah,
often needs to be grounded in respect and in fact,
yeah,
but
absolutely.
can be controversial or a counterpoint of view that you can
Yeah.
make strongly with
In
conviction.
fact, the case study method encourages that. The professors will encourage you to disagree. The best comment could be when 20 people have said one thing and the 21st person says something totally
Totally
different,
different.
absolutely in disagreement with them, but factually correct.
Or in the case study, it is encouraged that you disagree, but
Yeah,
when you disagree, make the point factually
yeah,
and make it respectfully,
yeah,
right?
absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
great. These are great, good insights. Let's speak more about what some of the biggest mistakes students make when they contact you? A lot of students will be contact potential Indians who are
Yeah,
applying to Harvard Business School, who want to know more about the culture, who want to understand what could make their
yeah,
application succeed. What
yeah,
are some of the mistakes they make, and what advice do you have for them?
yeah. So continuing my behavior of giving it straight, I think the biggest mistake people make it they expect shortcuts. You cannot get shortcuts. You cannot expect that now that it's your dream to get into a school. What can I do in the next 3 months so that I get into the school? I think a famous footballer or someone was once asked that why is it that you get paid millions of dollars to play one game? It just doesn't make sense. And his reply was, I've been training for this ever since I was 3 years old. Every day I've been working hard. So that's why I got here. My point is that you should ideally have been doing well in academics or your professional life or extracurriculars for a long period of time, because that's what the school is looking for: sustained, continued excellent performance. So don't think that suddenly something will change and you'll get into the school of your dreams. So have reasonable expectations. Yes, of course, if a school is your dream, you should try for it. But at the same time, what I would hate you do is you apply to the top three schools which you wanted to go. Unfortunately, your profile was not quite there yet, and then the end result was that you didn't get and end up getting anywhere. So be reasonable in your expectations. Do not feel that the last 6 months of NGO work will suddenly completely revamp your chances.
Change your
Unfortunately,
profile. Yeah.
like the schools are smarter than that. I would say that that's one mistake. The second mistake, like we were discussing earlier, was that make sure your research is very deep. You talk to people, ask them piercing questions, so you know what you're getting into. Do not enter a business school just because you need the brand and you do not care about the MBA education. I think the MBA education is underestimated in terms of what it teaches you. I felt that both in terms of hard skills and soft skills, it made me much more rounded. What I mean is, in terms of hard skills, it teaches you finance and business strategy and operations and marketing. So it almost gets all of them up to a certain mark. Similarly, with soft skills, a lot of the things it just brushes you up. So the end product is a person who is very well rounded in both hard and soft skills. And the experiences which you get, which could just be by having coffee with a friend who's so different from you, or doing things which are totally out of your comfort area, or traveling to countries, meeting people who grew up in a completely different culture from you, and then understanding those insights. Those kind of experiences also, I believe, are very rich. So don't just think of school in terms of a place which gets you a job. That'll be a huge waste of money. And lastly, often people, when they're confused about whether to do MBAs, they think, okay, this is what I'm making right now. This is what I'll make post school. I'll lose
Oh,
this much. Poof, doesn't work out. That's a horrible way of looking at it. Firstly, the value is not purely financial, and that's not how you should judge. Secondly, the IRR should not be for a 5-year time horizon, but for a 30-year time horizon.
yeah.
Howard often says, I like a phrase that a lot of schools can prepare you. In fact, a job can prepare you for the next 5 years of your life. But the real value which a school like Harvard does is prepare you for the last 10 years of your life. When you are in a very senior position, that's when some of these learnings, these dilemmas, these moral and ethical issues, the networks, the insight, the global context will become even much more important. So please see an MBA in a holistic sense, I would say.
We talked about this one thing yesterday that I want to make sure, and it's very specific to the essays,
Yeah,
particularly with long-term and short-term goals.
yeah,
I'd asked you yesterday, did you know you wanted to go into consulting, or did you write in your
yeah,
essays that you wanted to go into consulting? And
yeah,
you told me a very unique point. But why don't
yeah.
you tell that now?
Yeah. So, I think a lot of people do mention that this is exactly what I will do, which typically is impact investing. Just because if you've done consulting or investing but want to sound like a nice human being, you just say impact investing, just like 200 other people said, bad idea, don't do that.
Mm,
It's not a bad thing to say this is what I want to do. It shows clarity of vision. I felt that life changes too often too fast,
mm,
and I did not know what was coming in the next 2 years. So I did something which was slightly bold and candid. I said that I do not know what I will be doing. I know the broad sphere, it will be financial services. So it could be consulting in financial services, or it could be banking. It could be so many. It could be fintech. It could be so many other things. But I want to come to the school, learn, figure out, and keep my options open. And I know what I don't know. So I know the broad area, but otherwise I'll come and figure out. And unfortunately, it worked for me.
The equivalent of I want to do impact investing. So the people
Yeah,
that say impact investing typically
yeah,
come from a finance, like have worked
yeah.
in after undergrad in
Finance or
finance, and
consulting.
say,
Yeah,
hey, I want to
yeah,
show something nice about me. So impact
yeah.
investing. The equivalent of that for a tech person is I want to come back and create a company in India that will help underprivileged kids.
Of course.
I'm
Yeah.
like, if you really want to do that, show me where you've done it so far. Please tell me, what have you
Yeah,
done? One thing,
yeah,
I'd be happy.
absolutely. And schools
So,
can see through it.
and so easily.
Yeah,
Um, let's end with this. If you were to redo the experience of Harvard Business School again,
yeah.
what would you do differently?
It's a good question. Um, I would want to get into the school for different reasons, like I said. So what I got out of the school, which I was telling you earlier, is what I should have gone into the school thinking like this is what I want of the school, not just joining the rat race and doing what everyone is doing. I was happy I researched enough, so no regrets on that. I think the couple of other things, one which you were talking about earlier is balancing and not have FOMO and be prepared for missing out on things and have a clear priority and going forward in that direction. Another thing I would say is not worry about your jobs. So this is important. I think I'm a slightly risk averse person, maybe a lot of other people are. So it did bother me that, oh my God, what job am I going to get? And oh, I hope I get placed in the first few days, which is such a typical IIT mentality. It's fine, it's fine. I don't want to say, I don't want to make you complacent by saying that you will get the job of your dreams. No, that's absolutely not true. You need to slog and work hard and face a lot of failure, but things will happen. So keep working hard, but don't stress about it. I would also say one should be more proactive with things. So especially with the social part, go out of your way, schedule coffee chats and drinks and lunches and dinners with people you don't know, and you'll be surprised to see not just that your network expands, but more importantly that you'll suddenly start building good and close friendships. Like some of my best friendships were with people whom I traveled with, or whom I would often hang around with outside class, and that's the beginning. And then you just end up becoming very good friends. And please do use the school time not just to make wide networks, but also to build long-lasting, deep friendships. So be proactive in doing that. Something I feel networking, and we didn't discuss it yesterday. Networking is something which does not come naturally
Naturally.
to Indians. I think we feel a little hesitant. Could be part of because our society is a little hierarchical. So be a little bold in networking. That doesn't mean you need to be snobbish about it,
Yes,
but
please don't. Yeah.
put yourself out there a little more. It's okay if the person doesn't want to talk to you. It's all right. Now you don't need to go network with Jamie Dimon on day one, but network with a mid-level person, someone who you feel would be interested in you, who would value your skill set. And there's also a little bit of spray and pray, right? You meet a lot of people, and maybe one of them could be your next recruiter, or your next spouse for that matter. Who knows? So try to push yourself. I think that's the final thing I would say. Push yourself out of your comfort zone in as many ways as you can. You'll be surprised to see how that benefits you.
For everybody listening who want to learn how to naturally network in business school, join my class on natural networking in business
Oh, is
school.
that one? Oh,
Uh,
excellent.
and the, um, but I want to thank you. I want to thank you for doing this yesterday. I want to thank you for doing this today. I want to apologize for the technical glitches. You've been
No
very
worries at all.
kind with your time. Good luck on your endeavors, and I hope people make best use of this.
Thank you. Glad I could do this, and I'm glad people are benefiting from this amazing portal you've created. Thanks, Ashwin.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Okay.